Hello, fellow food lovers. Today I will be making Chinese steamed tofu with shrimp mousse. You will need 1 block of firm tofu, a quart of shrimp, 1 egg white, cornstarch. Seasoning for the shrimp mousse, you will need Chinese white pepper, Chinese cooking wine, and soy sauce. For the sauce, you will need 1 tablespoon of oyster sauce, 1 tablespoon of soy sauce, 1 teaspoon sugar, 1 teaspoon chicken powder, 1 teaspoon sesame oil, and 1 tablespoon of cornstarch. Okay, so I have a 1/4 pound of shrimp here. You don't need big shrimp, and you can't use small shrimp. So kind of like middle-sized shrimp, medium shrimp are probably the best to use for this. And the shrimp I bought, they were frozen, and they're shelled and deveined, except that the tails are still on, so I just had to pull the tails off them. If you have shrimp that are in the shell, you're going to have to shell them, and you're going to have to devein them as well, which is basically just cutting a slit down the back and kind of pulling the little vein out, or just actually like an intestine. Okay, so after I pulled the tails off, I'm just going to smash each shrimp so it's kind of mashed. So I'm just going to smash it with the side of the cleaver. You don't need a lot of pressure, it'll flatten out quite easily. And once that's done, once they're all smashed, I'm going to chop it with the cleaver. And chop it for a couple minutes so it's kind of minced up. You don't have to fine mince it, but as long as you don't see like big pieces of shrimp in there, then it's all ready to go. This technique is how Chinese people back maybe a generation ago used to make minced pork for like steamed pork patties and stuff like that. Sometimes they'll use 1 cleaver, sometimes they'll use 2 cleavers, alternating like a drum, like a snare drum. Okay, so I'm going to put the minced shrimp in a bowl. I'm going to season it. So I'm going to add a dash of Chinese white pepper. I'm going to add a splash of Chinese cooking wine. You don't want to add too much sauce. You want the shrimp to be too soggy. So just a little bit of cooking oil. So a little bit of Chinese cooking wine and a little bit of soy sauce is fine. So I'm going to use chopsticks. I'm going to kind of stir that up, mix the seasoning into the shrimp. Okay, so once that's done, I'm going to add 1 egg white into the mix. And the egg white is to help give the shrimp shape and form, so it's not all mushy when you cook it. So we're just going to use the egg white. The egg yolk you can save for something else. Don't put the egg yolk in there, just add the egg white only. Just going to mix that, make sure everything's all well mixed in. So the egg white is pretty much the only other ingredient than the shrimp for the shrimp mousse, plus the seasonings. Okay, so I got a block of firm tofu here. I highly recommend using firm tofu. Don't use soft tofu for this. So that's 1 block. Usually you get 1 block in a carton. So I'm going to cut this into 10 pieces. So I'm going to cut down the center longitudinally. And then I'm going to cut along the short end 4 cuts, so you get 10 pieces total. So this is a pretty classic Cantonese dish. There's 2 variations. You can steam it, which we're doing today, or you can deep fry it, and then you sauce it both ways. And Sometimes you can do it with shrimp mousse, and sometimes you can do it with ground pork. So I'll probably do it some other day with ground pork. Okay, so I got just enough space on the glass Pyrex pie plate for 10 slices of tofu. I'm going to use a spoon, a tablespoon. I'm going to dig out a little hole on the top of the slice of tofu that I'm going to actually use to put the shrimp mousse into. So I did that with all 10 pieces. And then you need to find a way to get the shrimp mousse to stick to the pork, the shrimp mousse to stick to the tofu. And usually Cantonese chefs will use cornstarch for that. So I got some cornstarch here. I'm going to put probably a tablespoon into a bowl. And I'm going to take a pinch of cornstarch and sprinkle it over the whole of each slice of tofu. So there's a little bit of cornstarch in each tofu slice on the top. And that will kind of keep the shrimp mousse in place so it doesn't fall off. You make the little hole in the top of the tofu as well to help hold the shrimp in place. Okay, so once that's done, once the cornstarch is in place, we're gonna spoon a tablespoon of shrimp paste on the top of each slice of tofu. So with a 1/4 pound of shrimp, you should have enough to portion out 10 tablespoons worth of shrimp, so that each tofu would be filled with shrimp. If you run out before you get to the last tofu, just kind of take a bit from the other pieces and use that to fill the remaining tofu slices. Mind you, if you have some left over, you can add it on to the tofu slices, so they'll have more shrimp in it. Okay, there you have it. That's 10 pieces of tofu with shrimp mousse on it, and we're going to steam it. So I got a wok. It's half filled with water. It's on high heat, so it's boiling. I'm going to put a rock at the bottom of the wok so I can keep the plate above water. So I just set that into the wok. Then I'm going to put a lid over top of that. And you want to make sure the lid's big enough so it doesn't touch the sides of the pie plate. Otherwise, a lot of water is going to flow into the plate. And then we're going to steam this for 12 to 15 minutes. So 12 to 15 minutes, depending on how strong your stove is. But to be on the safe side, 15 minutes will be just enough time to steam it. So there you go. That's 15 minutes have gone by, and shrimp looks definitely cooked. So I have this handy little gadget I bought at a Chinese grocery store. It's kind of 3 prongs, and it's used to lift plates and pie plates out of steamers so you don't burn your fingers. So I'm going to tilt it just so I can drain some of the water out. You don't want all that water in there. It'll dilute the sauce when you pour it over. Okay, so now we're going to fix the pieces because they're kind of tilted to one side of the plate. I'm just using a spoon to kind of inch everything over. Yeah, a pie plate is just big enough for 10 pieces of tofu from a block of tofu for doing this dish. Okay, I'm gonna make the sauce. So I gotta wok on high heat. I'm gonna add a glass of water. I'm gonna add a tablespoon of oyster sauce. I'm gonna add a tablespoon of soy sauce. I'm gonna add a teaspoon of sugar. A teaspoon of chicken powder. And a teaspoon of sesame oil. So we're going to let it come to a boil. You need the sauce to come to a boil before you add the cornstarch. You don't want to add cornstarch slurry to a cold sauce, otherwise it won't set. It needs heat to activate it, to thicken the sauce. So I'm going to put a tablespoon of cornstarch into a bowl. I'm going to add a quarter cup of water to that. So this is the cornstarch slurry. So I'm going to stir that, make sure the cornstarch is all dissolved in the water, and then I'm going to pour it into the sauce. As soon as you add the cornstarch slurry to the sauce, you want to stir it right away so it doesn't clump up. Okay, so I'm going to spoon the sauce over each piece of tofu. And it's done. Okay, so there you have it, that steamed tofu with shrimp mousse. It's got a gravy on it. A very common, very popular Cantonese dish that can be done two ways, either steaming like this or deep frying. And it can either have shrimp mousse on it or ground pork. A very tasty dish. And it goes well with rice too. Okay, bon appetit.